I want to thank our sponsors, Athletic Greens, who created AG1, one of the most innovative packets of supplements, including 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. These ingredients support your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. I personally started using Athletic Greens and love the way I feel in the morning after I drink it. And I no longer have energy crashes throughout the day. And the best part is that it's delicious. The founder of Athletic Greens created AG1 because he experienced a ton of gut health and ended up on a complicated and expensive supplement routine to recover. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Yasmin. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/Yasmin, YASMEEN, to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. In today's episode, I speak with Ulisse Di Corpo, who holds degrees in experimental psychology and a PhD in statistics and social research. In 1977, he developed the vital needs theory, which was the subject of his thesis in psychology and statistics and stems from the conflict between syntropy and entropy. Ulisse, to kick it off, what does syntropy actually mean?
Well, it comes from the fundamental equations in physics, but it helped me to solve the deep existential crisis I was in that period. Well, what the fundamental equations of energy say is that there are two solutions. One is a forward in time solution of energy, and the other one is a backward in time solution for energy. This second type of energy was considered to be impossible because it means that the future can retroact on the present. But if you look at the properties of these two types of energy, the first one is governed by the law of entropy. That means that you have the availability of energy and then it dissipates in the environment. The second one instead describes the concentration of energy, the increasing complexity, the formation of structures, and the properties are just those of life. So what comes out is that whereas the physical material side of reality is governed by the forward in time solution of entropy, life would be governed by this backward in time solution of energy. Well, this was discussed a lot at the beginning of last century, but then
So Ulisse, I want to double click on that because I'm not sure
yes.
I completely understand. And so can you break it down maybe for our audience who are unfamiliar with some of these terms? And because are you saying that we have control over our future, if that's the case?
No, not exactly. It means that I'm saying that we don't live in a causal reality, cause-effect reality, but in a super-causal reality. We are in the middle of, say, a flow of information that comes from the past and another one that comes from the future. The one that comes from the past is processed by our brain, and we can know about it through our physical senses. The second one, instead, it's processed by our autonomic nervous system. Now, if you do experiments studying the parameters of the autonomic nervous system, like heart rate, frequency, and skin conductancy, you find that these parameters react before future stimuli. So it seems that emotion, feelings, they propagate backward in time. And we would be in the middle of this two type of information, and we constantly have to decide if we want to follow our head or we want to follow our heart. Now,
let's say I want to pause there. I'm sorry, because there's so much gold in what you're saying, and I want to really
yes,
make it
okay.
accessible for people who are, for the first time, learning about these concepts. So what you're saying is that we have kind of physiological experiences in our body before events happen. So, for
Exactly.
example, if our, palms start to sweat or our heart starts to race a little bit faster, and maybe there's no present explanation for it, it's sort of a precognition to some future event. So that's like the one piece. And then the piece about the past is like, can we actually change our past, or what's the connection there? I don't think I'm following that part.
Well, now in this super causal model of reality, the future can act on the present and on the past. But what allows the future to retroact towards the past are feelings and emotion. It's what we can do with our art. Now, this is quite complex, but generally, what people experience is this strange ability to have premonitions. Like, for example, it has been studied in Iraq during war. Soldiers had the premonition of the attacks, and this has saved a lot of people from difficult situations. But also, there were studies done on commuter trains. When a train has an accident, there are less people that have boarded the train. It seems that people feel that something is going to happen, and some of them feel ill and don't board the train. The same thing happens with airplanes. When an airplane crashes, after check-in, a number of people feel ill and they don't board the plane. So we constantly receive information from the future. And if we pay attention to these emotions, we can choose in a more advantageous way.
Wow. So, and why do some people access information from the future while others don't? And is our present kind of state sort of an indication of what's to come? Or like, there's so many variables here, right? Like, what's the, yeah, what is that about?
Well, I think that everyone has the ability to feel the future, to have this inner feeling, inner emotions. But we live in a culture that has focused on materiality, on the visible side of reality. And so it needs some training to learn how to feel the future. And this training can have aspects of meditation so that you focus on these inner feelings of the heart, but also it requires that you in a way clean your autonomic nervous system, this inner side, from all what can cover these emotions. Because what happens is that when we're not going towards, say, syntropy, that is this vital energy that comes from the future, we feel void and suffering in our autonomic nervous system. Instead, when we are going towards syntropy, we feel warmth and well-being. Is like the needle of a compass that it tells if you're going in the right direction or not. A lot of people inside themselves, they have these feelings of void, suffering, and anxiety. And what they do is they cover these inner feelings. And when you cover these inner feelings, it's very difficult to feel the future.
Well, so you talked about like how you can clear your autonomic nervous system. Cause I think case in point right now, so many people are like sitting in a space of fear and anxiety. So how can you discern the fear that you're creating in your own mind versus fear of the future of what's to come? Cause I think that piece is where I feel like a lot of people say, oh, like I have an intuition, but really it's just they're in their like thoughts of fear. They're almost creating their future. So I'm just curious, like, what's the difference between those two, if you have, any observations there?
Well, one of the key elements is not to have fear about the future. One of the person that was using a lot this inner feelings, these intuitive feelings, was, for example, Steve Jobs. He was an extremely intuitive person that was able to feel the future and the wealth and the richness of Apple computer came from this ability. Well, what he did was that he said one of the most important things is not to fear death. If you don't fear death, anything that you do, in a way, you don't have to fear what your intuitions are telling you, and you don't have to fear your heart. You have to listen to it. So one of the way of blocking people from feeling the future is to increase this state of fear, and we need to come out of it, and this can be done having a broader perspective of life in which we consider that death is a part of life and we don't have to fear death.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So amazing. I mean, yeah, I think that's the kind of central fear of all of us, right? Which this idea of the ego death, no longer existing. Wow. So, Ulisse, I want to understand a little bit more about how we can actually perhaps go in and change our future. I mean, do we have agency other than like, not being in a state of fear and accepting our death? What can we do day in and day out? Like, how do you sort of operate in a space where you can show up and live your best life?
Well, one thing is to trust what your heart is telling, and your heart speaks through emotions. I was saying it gives you feelings of warmth and well-being when you're going towards the right direction, and it gives you feelings of void and suffering when you're going in a direction that is wrong. The problem is that it doesn't tell you what it is. It doesn't speaks to you with words. So you just have to trust these feelings and go in the direction where your heart is pointing to, and then you'll find that that was the right direction to follow. Now, the difficulty that a lot of people have is that they cover these feelings of the heart, so they are not able to listen to them in a clear way. In my personal life, what has helped me to focus more on these feelings is that now it's nearly 50 years that I'm a vegetarian. I began on the 19th of February 72, and it's a long time, and that has helped me a lot to have a direct contact with these inner feelings, and usually avoiding everything that can act on your autonomic nervous system helps you to pay attention to these feelings and choose in a more appropriate way.
I mean, that's so difficult, I think, for so many people to just be entirely in their heart. And and like you said, a lot of people have covered up their heart and like kind of like using their mind to sort of make feelings from their heart, because we're not really taught that in culture to sort of make decisions from the heart, or to, I guess, be in a state of, not have fear, be in our heart, accept our death.
Yes.
I mean, how many people
and don't
doing
pay
that?
attention to what other people say. If your heart tells you to go in a direction, that is what you have to do. We have to be independent from the judgment of other people.
Amazing. And what have you found in your research on this piece? Like, are there any stories that you can share with us about people that, have kind of used this methodology or?
Well, I think several people use this methodology. Like one point with this idea about entropy and syntropy is that the world's intuition and synchronicities come from syntropy, from the future. And so we have to increase this syntropic side of our life. But the future is invisible, so we have to increase the invisible side of our life. And that can be very difficult because since it is invisible, you don't know exactly how to do it. But on the other side, when you increase syntropy, entropy reduces. And so a way to increase the invisible side, the syntropic side, is to reduce your entropic side. So that means that if you live in a minimalist way, reducing as much as possible your entropy, the syntropic side increases, and that brings well-being, wealth, and happiness in your life. And a lot of people have learned that. For example, I was saying about Steve Jobs. He used to live a very minimalist and essential life. But another person that is using this trick is Elon Musk. He lives a very minimalist life. And this is a key element in order to have intuitions coming from the future.
So you're saying that a minimalist life, like, to have meaning, and then to also have a minimalist life in terms of like not having a lot of possessions and focusing on, can you say a little bit more about that? I really want to understand.
Well, that is a key element of this trick of increasing syntropy and receiving the wealth and happiness from the future. And I know that we're so focused on the material side that most people believe that happiness is achieved by increasing your material side, but this only increases entropy and leads you towards, say, a low level of syntropy, and that means a difficult connection with the future and with the intuitions. And so in a way, you have to start thinking in a very counterintuitive way, because we have been taught to follow certain ideas, but syntropy says that probably we should rethink these ideas about where well-being and happiness is located.
Wow. So is that something that you practice too? They say the simplistic,
Yes,
minimalistic.
well, I've practiced it in my life. It happened to me to help other people to practice it, and it's a bit like magic, because you know the equations just tell you that if you reduce entropy, syntropy increases, and when syntropy increases, you have synchronicities that starts coming out. You have intuitions, visions, and opportunities. And it happened to me to help, I would say, many people in this direction, because it's not easy for someone to reduce its entropy. You need often the help by someone that is accustomed to this kind of tricks and games. And really, I could see it in the equations that they say this would happen, but seeing it in reality, it really looked like magic. I didn't believe it at the beginning that it could be possible.
Wow. Is there anything else that we could do to become more syntropic, to create these synchronicities? And how much, I guess, agency do we have in terms of, I guess, like building what you call heart and brain coherence?
Yes. Well, what I would say is in this model, we have the heart that provides you the direction, and the brain that provides you the tools. So they're both necessary, but in a way, the key element is the heart. Now, we are focused on the brain, and so a lot of people have lost the direction in their life, and they feel their life meaningless and without a purpose. Instead, when you focus on the heart, you start finding the purpose, the meaning, and the direction of your life. The way how you can do it are many, and every person is different. So there is not a recipe that is common for everyone. Everyone has to try, experience, and see which solutions work with him. And I've written a lot of books in this field and also some novels to make it more accessible. And they're all available on Amazon, these books. There are also videos. And so I would suggest maybe if someone is interested to look at the website, which is syntropia.it, in which you can find all these links.
Oh, great. And is there a particular book that you recommend for kind of first timers?
Well, there is a book that I wrote in '96, and it was a novel which is named The Theorem of Love. And now it's part of a trilogy. And I think that is a very easy way to get in this type of concepts. Then there is a scientific way to approach all this, say, topic, but that might not be, say, that easy at the beginning. So I would suggest, if someone is interested, to start with this novel, The Theorem of Love.
Okay, great. And one thing I'm thinking about in our conversation is, we talk a lot about kind of feeling states and the heart having a lot of wisdom, as long as we can get out of a state of fear. But what about being able to, because I always say there's a difference between intuition and then also intention and co-creating our reality. So, other than focusing more on becoming syntropic, is there any, or have you done any studies on being able to sort of shift? Like, let's say there's something coming that you don't like. Can you change your feeling state to create a different reality?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, I've experienced that a lot. That one of the tools that I use is silence. Like I've done a lot of Zen meditation, and at the beginning I found it very difficult because you have this chatter of your mind that is continuously working. Then slowly, when you start doing this silent meditation, you have spaces that starts dividing this thought, this chatter in your mind. And these spaces slowly grow wider. And in these spaces where there is no thought, if you put an intention, then it really propagates and it has an effect. So what I suggest is to try to learn this technique of calming the chatter of our mind in such a way that our intentions can get in this very calm sea of syntropy and propagate in all the directions. Now, one thing that I've done with, I was in California in 2012 for a conference on science and non-duality, and I was hosted by a friend, a healer, that was quite a famous healer. Now he died a few years ago, and he was saying passionate for the Giants, and there were the baseball finals in San Francisco, and so he was trying to do this healing on the players of the Giants to have them win the games, but it didn't work. The Giants were just continuously losing. So what I told him was that according to syntropy, if you work in a retrocausal way, the effect amplifies. And this is a very important law, is that whereas with entropy, you have to increase the cause to have a bigger effect, with syntropy, you have to reduce it as much as possible, but have it in a retrocausal way so that it amplifies. And it is what is normally called a butterfly effect. Well,
Ulisse, can you say more about that? Because, sorry, I just want to understand. Can you give us an example? Yeah.
yes, this butterfly effect was discovered in 1963 by Lawrence. He was a meteorologist. He found that a very small variation, if it was in line with a tractor, so we have causes in the past and attractors in the future, could amplify and produce very big events like a hurricane. He said a flap of a butterfly in the Amazonia can cause a hurricane in the United States. And this law is used in many fields, like, for example, in homeopathy, water is used to produce the remedies, but you put the active substance and then it's diluted to the point that you're sure that there is not even a molecule of the active substance. Well, the more you dilute the remedy, the more it becomes powerful. And that is the reason why they say that homeopathy can't be real, it's not scientific, because there is nothing in the remedy because you've diluted it. But the effects of homeopathy can be seen, for example, in agriculture or in animals that would not be, say, under a placebo effect. They would not be affected by this placebo effect.
So can we take that example into the intention example? So specifically, if, let's say, with the Giants, if he wanted the Giants to win.
Well, okay, what happened with the Giants?
Yeah, what should he have done is basically
well, what he started doing was to record the game without knowing what the result was, and then look at the game and start doing this healing on a game that had already happened. Working in this way, the Giants started winning the games and scoring results which were just incredible, and they won the Super Bowl in a totally unexpected way. Surely it was a coincidence, but the idea is that if you work in a retrocausal way, the effect amplifies and can become very powerful. And it is what is also true with homeopathy, because homeopathy works following this retrocausal
so you're saying,
effect.
They say that if an event already happened, then you can go back to it and then kind of go in and set your intention and healing, or like look at the sort of videotape of the event after it happened. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, well, in a way, because of this game between past and future, the past is not totally fixed.
Wow!
But in order to affect on the past, you need to use feelings and emotions. It's something that is done on the heart level. This means that we can go back in the past in order to improve the past. We cannot go back in the past to kill someone, but we can go back in the past to, say, solve difficulties and situations. And this, in a way, can explain how miracles work. Because if you go in the past of a person and solve the beginning of the illness of that person, then the illness in the present just disappears.
So this is a very important point that I haven't heard from a lot of folks, like about going into the past to change the present and the future. And so how often does this need to happen? And by the way, for anyone listening, this should be done only for positive things, right?
Well, it doesn't work if you want to do it in a negative way, because you can do only what the attractor wants to do. So you're just a tool in the hands of the attractor, and the attract is syntropic and works for life, doesn't work for death.
Wow.
So So if you provide yourself to the intention of the attractor, you can change the past, but you cannot change whatever you want to. So it's not up to you what you can change or not. It is up to this final end, this attractor that retracts from the future to, in a way, to choose what has to be done.
So it's basically choosing life even at the expense of your own kind of personal agenda. But I imagine that for people that may have had like traumatic childhoods or kind of, inner child issues that keep coming up, that they can go back to these past moments, relive them, and sort of heal them.
Yes, well, that is a possibility. It is, in a way, it is done. Also, people that do hypnotherapy, they often use a kind of approach of this kind because in hypnotherapy, time becomes unitary. Past, present, and future are not anymore divided. And so you can, in a way, go in the past of the person, which is the real past. It's not only his memories, and change what happened then. And you see the changes in the present then.
Wow, that's so fascinating. And so, can you speak a little bit more about the brain and heart coherence, maybe defining it for folks? I know we didn't do that earlier, um, but I just think it would be important. I know that there's a lot of people that are speaking now about the word coherence, and I think we're using it in the mainstream, but like I don't think it has actually hit the mainstream. So, yeah, like what does that sort of mean energetically? Maybe you could tell
Well,
folks.
the problem is often that the heart and the brain are in a conflict. They don't work together. So what we need to do is that the brain has to learn that he is a tool of the heart. So if we have to look at a hierarchy, we first have the heart in the first position, and then the brain as a tool of the heart. And when the brain accepts to be the tool of the heart, then you start building this cooperation and coherence between heart and brain. And for example, just to give an idea, in the West, we have the idea that consciousness is in the brain. In the East, instead, the idea is that consciousness is in the heart. And that has huge implications because that means that if our head, in a way, stops working, like in a coma, our consciousness is still alive, but in a different way, saying this kind of unitary space time that we experience at our heart level.
Wow. And I imagine that if people are using or making decisions from the head and then the heart is following, that a lot of it is probably not syntropic.
Yes. Well, we should first see what the heart tells and which is the direction. And then we should provide the tools that our head, our rationality has. And this is what distinguishes people that are intuitive, is that intuitions are made following your heart. And then the head follows the intuition. And this was something that Steve Jobs was always telling, that he learned in India the power of intuition. So he was having these incredible intuitions, which were totally irrational. And then he had, in a way, to have his brain follow these intuitions. And when brain and heart start working together, this process is not that difficult and complicated, because often people really leave this battle between the head and the heart instead of a harmony.
Yeah, I think we need to teach classes on this topic because I feel like so many people are disconnected from their hearts and also, from a multitude, I think, of traumas, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just not taught to really feel into our heart and to stay in our heart, especially at work, right? Like, especially in our jobs, which require often left brain thinking. But wow. And Steve Jobs, I remember reading vaguely or reading somewhere that the book that he carried around everywhere was Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yes,
I don't know if that's true, but
that is true. Yes.
So I have so many more questions, and I know we're coming up at time, but I'm curious, what's sort of the biggest surprise that you have found from this work, and how have you used it in your own life?
Well, I must say that my life is totally concentrated in this direction. But the biggest surprise have been synchronicities, because when you start working in this direction, the future starts entering in your present, and the future manifests as coincidences that are meaningful coincidences. And I had so many, and it happens continuously to have these synchronicities that at the beginning you just think they're uh, say incredible coincidences, and then you start learning that they are there to, in a way, give you a path towards the direction that you have to follow. So they are meaningful. They're providing you a way that it is important to follow. And the invisible side of reality really works in ways which are totally different from rationality, and that we need to, in a way, get familiar with and start trusting, because it is very difficult to follow your heart, because we tend not to trust what our heart is telling us, because we have been always taught to follow our head. So in a way, it's a totally a shift in the way how we give priorities in our life.
And Ulisse, how is following the heart different than, like, some people say, like, somatically, like they feel, some sort of, I don't know, pain in the belly, and I'm curious because, like, how is that different from body trauma?
Well, as I was telling you before, we have mainly two signals. One is warmth and well-being in our solar plexus, in our heart area. The other one is void and suffering, which usually people call anxiety or angst. And these two signal um, provide you information about where you're heading to, where you're going to. So it is very important to listen to the signals and try to find when you're feeling warmth and well-being, because that is the direction that we have to follow.
Fascinating. Yeah, I'm so curious about, some of the kind of somatic feelings versus the heart versus the head, because I think a lot of people are confused, about all these things and and what they mean. But the warmth, I mean, the warmth is great. I think it's sometimes it can be hard to discern whether that relates to a person, your job, right? Like, I think that's the piece to me that feels hard for people, right? Like, how do we make sense of this feeling? Does it, does it apply to just your personal life, your professional life? And is that's kind of like the job of the person to figure out what that means?
Well, yes, these feelings are not usually associated with information, and that is the difficulty, because you know that they're telling you something, but you don't know what they're telling you. The important thing is to learn to follow the feelings of warmth and well-being, the direction that they're heading to. It needs time and training, and often when you have to do very important decisions, you have just a matter of of few seconds to decide. So you cannot use your rationality. It is extremely important if you have to do big decisions to be trained to listen to your heart, because your heart tells you which is the decision that you have to follow.
I love that. And what is your perspective on the pandemic in terms of syntropy and entropy?
Well, it is very complex. Looking at it as a statistician, if you look at the data, you see that in China, the pandemic was solved in February 2020. So they had the therapies, the cures, they knew what to do, and they have had only very limited cases since in the last 2 years. Because when they do continuously this test of the population to find positive people. When they find positive people, they do a quarantine and they are treated immediately with this therapies that are effective. Now, when the pandemic started in Italy in March 2020, Chinese doctors came to Italy to bring materials, but also to bring the knowledge of the treatments that were effective. Well, there is a big discussion on this point in Italy is that the health department just stopped the Chinese from teaching to the doctors in Italy how to save people, what therapies they could use. And all the doctors that were following these protocols, they were stopped or kicked away from hospitals or removed as from the, list of medical doctors. So it seemed, it is clear that there was no intention to have a therapy working. And there are a lot of trials going on this topic in Italy because the idea is that they didn't want effective therapies in order to say that only the vaccine was the only possible remedy. And this is very clear with the numbers because you see that in China, there are no cases, whereas in the West, we have an explosion. Now, my impression is that with this Omicron, we will have, it works like a natural vaccine, that it will provide the herd immunity to the population. And so in a matter of a couple of months, I think COVID will be totally over. That is my impression.
Yes. And the way this will be, this episode will be launched a couple months out. So I guess we'll find out if that's the case.
If that is true or not.
So Ulisse, this has been so fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. What do you want to tell our listeners about your kind of main takeaway as like a call to action? What's sort of the last few things that you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, what I think is very important is that people should learn to think in an independent way. So we don't have to follow what other people say, but just follow what our heart and our mind in a way are telling. And it is very difficult because when you start being an independent person, then a lot of other people start having difficulties with you. But this provides you with very big possibilities and opportunities. So just feel free and be independent.
Wow. Amazing. And where can people find you, Ulisse? Where are there resources that you can point folks to?
Well, I would point to this website, which is syntropia.it, or there is another website, which is syntropy.org.
And it's spelled differently in Italy, correct? Syntropy is spelled with
In Italy, it is spelled with I and not with Y.
yes.
So it is SINTROPIA.IT. And you'll find a lot of material in that website.
Amazing.
Or just put on the web my name. I'm the only one that has the name Ulisse Di Corpo, and you'll find information about syntropy.
And Ulisse is spelled with an ULISEE for those who are listening.
No, SSE.
Oh, no.
ULISSE DICORPO.
Okay. Well, I'm so happy that I got that. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Let's say this has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like we just scratched the surface. So I'm excited to dive in and learn a lot more and read the Theorem of Love as a first start. So thank you.
Yes, it's available on Amazon. So
amazing. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you a lot for the opportunity. And
thank you so much, Ulisse. It was so wonderful. For our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about entropy and syntropy and how heart and brain coherence can change your life. And you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.